I got in touch with the London folk, the RASC group in London. I've noticed that there is a grazing occultation event next year that is definitely worth looking at. And as a start, this is video. Peter and I went out to, in 2017 in March, we drove out to near Arthur, and we watched the grazing occultation of Aldebaran, which I believe is the brightest star that can be grazed by the moon. Because the moon is always within 5 degrees of the ecliptic, north or south. What the graze is you're catching the star at the southern or northern limb of the moon. And if you catch it right, it'll peak behind and in front of the mountains several times. It's a thin band, maybe 1 kilometer or 2 wide. And this is the video that I took. This was just a, do I need this?
Yes.
What? Do I need this?
Yes.
Okay. This was just with my 300 millimeter zoom lens on a camera, and I just piggybacked it on my telescope. But the telescope didn't have, it was just, it was equatorial mount, but it didn't have a drive. But this is what we got. Okay, so you can see the star Aldebaran there, and there's some other stars. Yeah, so there it just winked out, so the event started, and you could hear a few people cheering and stuff. So this is as far as generally on. Oh, you haven't plugged it there.
Now you've got it.
Now you
see it
no, so this is unedited. The event, we didn't know when it was going to start because you can't be sure, so you start playing in a couple minutes soon. So it's disappeared now. Over there somewhere. And then it comes back. It was a far better view visually through the telescope. So each of us had our own telescopes, and we're watching it, and we're all going, "Oh, it's back! It's back!" Now, the interesting thing about this star, this was also observed in British Columbia and a few other places. Now, out west, there was a guy named Alan Whitman, who I've never met him, but he was the observer's chair at the time, and he watched this event from BC, and he said he'd seen maybe 20 of these types of events, and it was by far the best one. And he thought it disappeared and came back about 20 times. And we noticed it, and he noticed it, that it didn't just disappear and reappear. It became variable. It was like a kid had a switch in the light and was turning it on, so it got dimmer and brighter, and that shouldn't happen. But the theory is that the Aldebaran is such an enormous star that we were actually detecting its diameter as only part of the star was hidden. It's a remarkable thing. Wow. It's still going on, and this is full time. This is not slowed down or sped up or anything. And it's almost, yeah. Now, since I have some time, this was a remarkable event because, as I said, it's the brightest star that can be occulted. The moon was high. The moon wasn't full or anything like that, but this star is so bright that isn't a problem. Some grazing events are a 5th or 6th magnitude star. If it's a full moon, you're going to have a hard time spotting it. The only negative was that it was about minus 15, minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it was bloody cold. That's
did they use the occultation to prove the Einstein theory of relativity?
That was done during the eclipse.
But it was a star.
The moon's too big.
But there was a star associated with it.
Yeah. So, anyways, it was also on a Saturday night at about 11 o'clock, so it was near perfect. So I'm going to give you that's why you should see it. Now, to be fair, that's as good as it gets. But this one's not bad, so let's see if I can. Okay, this was the graze map of Aldebaran. You get this information from the IOTA, and I've tried to, this is the line where you want her to be to the north. The center of the moon was way up here. So the further you're down this way, the further away from the center of the moon you are. The line they give you is the theoretical diameter of the moon. But because there's mountains and hills and valleys, the line may not be the best place to be, and it's a bit of a crapshoot as to where you set up based on that. So this here, that's the town of Arthur. We went to a Tim Hortons, and once we warmed up, there was a fellow watching us, and he says, "I'm doing the same thing as you two are." So he said, he was coming in from Toronto and went to the Tim Hortons too. It was a cold night. So I said, "I think we know where we're going, follow us." So we went down this road, which is the main road east, and down a gravel road, and we went somewhere around here. We set up on the gravel road and waited. And then about, you see I'll go to the next slide. These are shots that I took. Again, in this case, I'm just holding the camera by hand and taking shots. So before I left the house, this was 3 hours before the graze. That's Aldebaran, and that's the moon. I was loading up the car with the telescope, so I just took that picture. And then I went to call Peter. Peter and I carpooled up to Arthur and saw the event. Now you saw the video. This was taken about 3 or 4 minutes after the event, and then 6 minutes later, the star is there. But you see this in real time, and even though the moon moves slowly, when the graze starts with high magnification, you've got reference. It really was a spectacular event.
You just
So-
need to schedule it in the summer.
Yes, yeah. Well, again, it was March 4th, and it was clear, so this is the line for this one. You'll see that London is well positioned. It goes right through the city, and I'll give some more details. I think Grand Band's up here, and down here it's very, very close to Turkey Point. So you want to be on that line somewhere.
How close?
Pardon?
Close to the line, do you know? I mean, I remember some of the ISS and whatnot, you had to be within 100 yards or something of the line to see it hit the sun at all.
Well, it's the exact same as the lunar profile. So if the mountains in the moon is 30,000 feet, there's a range. So anywhere, you don't need to be on the line, you got some play. A kilometer north or a kilometer south is probably good. In fact, when they time these things, the North York guys, I'll go back. The North York guys were down here in Mississauga, and they set up a line. So up near a golf course, they were, and you can see the video online. A few hundred yards north and a few hundred yards south, they set up about 6 stations, and they all videotaped it and they synchronized it. So you can actually see the different times when the blinking went off and on. It was probably the best example that's been done in history. I can't imagine it's been done before. So there is a bit of play there. It's not, you're right about the ISS thing. I think you got more room than that. But it's based on the lunar profile. And you can't.
Marie might tell us where to stand, but nobody else can.
Okay, so
Trevor got it perfect.
the reason I called the London guys, because it goes right through the city of London. And I put there the Conan Observatory, which is an observatory at Western, is here. And it's only 1.5 kilometers off the line, so it might be a very good place. So that might be a good place to go. And I told them, because they obviously know the city well, and they'll be able to find out from the city parks, good parking lots and things like that to observe.
They'll know where the clouds aren't going to be.
Yeah. Well, that too.
It's their city, they should know.
So some basic, there's one minor problem with the graze, is that the moon's only 8% or 8 or 9 degrees above the horizon, so it's setting in the west. So we need a good west. Now the star in question, and I'll get to that, I'll show on a chart later, is Epsilon Tauri, which is it's a 3.5 magnitude star in Taurus, and if you're familiar, we're all familiar with the Hyades and the picture of the horns of the bull. The one tip is Aldebaran, This star is the other tip. So 3.5 mag is a damn good star. And the other good advantage, you can do it from London because the star is easily bright enough to be seen in a telescope. Then you need a telescope anyways. So the time is April 25th, and this is good too because it's a Saturday at just before 10 p.m. I was assuming I got the daylight saving time right. The moon is only 8% illuminated, so it's a very thin crescent, and the sky is dark, so that's the other thing that can happen when you're doing occultations. You can see this in Calgary, but the sun's above the horizon, so obviously the moon will be higher though. And it is a Saturday evening. So this is the one sky shot I took, or captured. The horizons here, there should be trees, maybe you can see them, but it shows the Pleiades, Aldebaran, and the thin moon, and the star in question. And I just use the city of London as my viewing point. And the close-up shows this. So this is taken maybe a few minutes before. Any sky software shows it reasonably accurately. But this is just a few minutes before the graze starts, and you can see the star there. This is right in the middle of the graze, and that's what you see. Again, it's only 8 degrees above the horizon. And in this case, it's the south limb of the moon. And the other advantage we have is that it's also, the graze is on the the star is on the dark side of the moon, which makes it a little easier to see. So that's all I got on that. I mention it now because I emailed Peter Jedicke of the London Centre, and he sent that information to the forums. So next month I won't be here, so by the time we start thinking about it again, it might be January, February, and then it might be time to see if anybody in this group would be interested in either going to London, or because it's a Saturday, you might choose to go west, where it's a good dark sky, and you can have a regular observing session, right? As long as you can find a place to park that's safe and has the field that's near that line. So you can think about all those things. So is there any interest in going to London? And I just want to email them and say, going down and doing this in London. And there's a few hands. And again, the other option, of course, is just to go on your own and find a spot in the dark and have a session. Now, there was something else?
I have something.
Any questions?
I have something.
Yeah.
Historically, occultations up to about 10 years ago did actual real scientific work. They would set up lots of star parties like this. We used to get notices about this. And what it was if you can see a star graze across the edge of the moon, and you have a number of observers in a number of different locations, you sit there with a very precise time watch, and you measure the time it blinks in and out. And what you do is, and when you triangulate all of this together, you get a profile of the mountains on the edge of the moon. And it actually gives you, before they actually had satellites orbiting the moon and doing radar and all that sort of stuff, this was how we found out how high the mountains were on the edge of the moon. And you can imagine how much, because these things would only last about a minute, how much time it took to actually do the entire diameter, the entire circumference of the moon. And this was done for at least the last 100 years. And they used to have parties and set them all up, and everybody had to go to different locations and everything. So this is sort of unique that they're actually doing it, but I would like to see it. I've only ever seen one before.
Yeah, it's similar to what they do with an asteroid if it blinks out a bright star. And if you're 10 miles away from each other and it disappears, then you know that it gives you a profile of the asteroid. So there's probably still some use in that, but this is more recreation. The data that I found gives you the way the mountains look, but it's hard to read unless you're an expert.
That's how they confirm the location of Ultima Thule. It blinked out. They watched a piece of the sky and it blinked out for a quarter of a second, and then they knew it actually existed.
So anyways, I'll email Peter and say some of us might be interested in coming to London, because they'll be able to do an event at the observatory through the university, because it is on a Saturday. So that's the advantage there now. Just to change topic completely, the December Journal of the RASC is available for download, and I get a hard copy mailed to me. That should be in soon too. I have an article in there, and I hope you have a chance to read it. It involves a part of the story is a mass execution that took place in Cuba. So I guarantee you won't find anything like that in the Sky and Telescope. So it involved a kid from Edinburgh who moved to Toronto in the 1860s. And when he became 16 or 17, he went to sea. So he lived in Toronto and he goes to sea. And it was down there he learned celestial navigation. And the ship he was on was a pirate ship. And they were involved in trying to bring munitions into Cuba to resist the Cubans. And the Cubans found out about it. So the crew got escorted to Cuba, and they just fire squat most of the people. And we think because of his age, he was spared. He was only 18. I happened to meet the great-great-grandson of this man, and he lived in Georgetown. So we agreed to meet at a Guelph coffee shop, and we had a chat for over an hour, and his mother was there. Now, the RASC started in 1903, and before that, for most of the time, it was known as the Toronto Astronomical Society. So he became, once he returned back to Toronto, became into a more normal life. He took up astronomy and joined the TAS, the Toronto Astronomical Society, in the 1890s. And for 10 years of service, they decided to give him a pocket watch. And the great-great-grandson still has that pocket watch. So he brought it in and he took some photos, and part of his personal story, it was nothing to do with astronomy, was the executions that happened to some of his friends and crewmates in Cuba. It's called the Virginius Affair. I didn't know anything about it, but I mean, they should make a Hollywood movie about this. It's fantastic. So in 1900, he traveled to North Carolina, a place called Wadesboro, where there was a total solar eclipse. And some of the professional or astronomy observatories had people there. The British British Astronomical Society had people. Yerkes Observatory was there, and that was E.E. Bernard. And all of these people were set up watching the eclipse. And there's a lovely picture of him set up with a small telescope doing some work. And then that was in May of 1900. He got the watch in 1901, and by September 1901, he was dead. He had a brain injury of some sort, and his wife at that time was pregnant with their 5th daughter. So it's a fantastic story, and I hope you get a chance to read it. I'll finish there. Thank you.
My telescope, I don't know, maybe 12 years old, something like that. I'd never seen one before, and it was in the handbook. This might be 1966. Anyway, watch the through the eyepiece, and like you said, it's amazing. They just go through the mountains and they go blink, on, off, on, off, on, off, as it goes across through the mountains. I have no idea how important the science is from it now, but I know back in the day they would recommend that people have like a video camera to record, if you could, and have something that would record the sound on the film, so it would be perfectly synchronized. And then you would have the shortwave time signals. Canada has one, CHU Canada, and States WWV. I believe that one comes out of Fort Collins, Colorado. But you'd have that in the background, and it has the exact beat And you can, to a fraction of a second, these things can be calculated from the video. And as Clark was saying, they can tell all of the size, the height, the width of these mountains. And by having them along a line, be amazed the difference you can get from one to another. Just, you know, there's the moon so far away, and yet a few hundred feet apart, you're getting different timings. It is very interesting. Thank you, Clark.